Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a burned-out agronomist escapes to the Colorado hills to grow tomatoes and find peace, he doesn't expect war. But when a power-hungry HOA and a shadowy developer target his land, he fights back with soil, silence, and stunning vengeance. This is how roots beat greed. They say the mountains keep secrets, but I think they just don't give a damn. Which is exactly why I moved up here. I left corporate life behind 2 years ago, after 20 long, ulcer-ridden years working as an agricultural technologist for a company that cared more about shelf life than soil health. I cashed out early, took the penalty, bought myself a weathered 12-acre farmstead up in the Colorado hills, and decided to grow something real for a change. Tomatoes that didn't taste like plastic, corn that didn't need a chemistry degree to digest, basil you could smell from the driveway. A quiet, honest life. No boardrooms, no spreadsheets, and most importantly, no committees, no neighborhood councils, and definitely no damn HOAs. The land had been sitting untouched for almost 15 years when I bought it. Overgrown, tired, but still breathing. The house was barely standing. A sagging front porch, windows crusted with dust, and a barn with more raccoons than rafters. But the bones were good, and I had time, tools, and a stubborn streak longer than the driveway. Spring came late this year, but when it did, it hit fast and full of purpose. I spent March rebuilding the irrigation lines and running drip feeders across the southern slope where the sun hit strongest. I installed raised beds in clean rows, fortified with wire fencing and compost I'd been cooking since last summer. It was neat, deliberate, not some chaotic patchwork of junk and dirt, but a clean, orderly system. If anything, it looked more like a botanical demo site than a farm. I planted 6 varieties of tomatoes, 2 rows of sweet corn, an entire lane of green beans, and enough basil to supply every overpriced pizza joint in Aspen. I even built a little handmade wooden sign for the entrance that said, Haynes Homestead, Easter 2023, just for the hell of it. Felt like claiming the space. I was watering the 3rd row of corn when I saw them for the first time. 3 figures walking up the gravel access path like they own the trail. A tall, lean woman with a clipboard and the facial expression of someone who's been holding in a fart since breakfast, flanked by 2 short men in khakis and matching polo shirts. HOA uniforms, if I had to guess. One of them was carrying a camera. Real subtle. Afternoon, I called out, not breaking my rhythm. I wasn't surprised. Curious people wandered up here sometimes. Hikers, photographers, that one lost cyclist with a broken chain who cried when I gave him lemonade. The woman, later I'd learn her name was Karen, of course, didn't return the greeting. She pointed her clipboard at my garden like it was a crime scene. What exactly is going on here? I turned off the hose, gave her a long look. Growing food on my land. She stepped forward, ignoring the tone. This activity hasn't been authorized by the Clear Valley Heights Homeowners Association. I blinked. That's because I'm not in the Clear Valley Heights Homeowners Association. She tilted her head, like I'd just told her the moon was a potato. According to our community visibility guidelines, all large-scale land modifications must be approved through the Aesthetics Committee. That includes agricultural activity visible from any public or communal roads. I nearly laughed. You're a mile and a half away. Our jurisdiction includes extended visual corridors and environmental impact radiuses. That one almost broke me. Environmental impact radius, I repeated. Lady, I'm growing tomatoes. I'm not building a uranium mine. She didn't flinch. Just whipped out some laminated pamphlet titled Unified Landscape Compliance Protocols. I glanced at it long enough to see clip art trees and a diagram of something that looks suspiciously like a prison yard. I think you're confused, I said calmly. This land was part of an independent parcel subdivision from 1977. It's never been annexed by Clear Valley Heights or anyone else. Here, I pulled my phone out and opened the digital property map I'd saved. See this outline? That's my boundary. I bought the whole parcel outright. No HOA, no encumbrances. Karen's smile was tight enough to snap dental floss. That may be your understanding, but we've received several complaints already. Your setup creates a visual discontinuity between zones. Visual discont? What the hell does that even mean? It means, she said, voice rising a notch, that your property's appearance undermines the cohesive visual narrative of the community. That's when I put the phone away. Listen, you don't have jurisdiction here. I don't pay dues. I don't get your newsletters. I don't have a mailbox with an eagle on it. I'm not interested in a cohesive narrative. I'm interested in food. You're standing on private land, and unless you've got a badge or a warrant, I'd appreciate it if you leave." Her cronies shifted uncomfortably, probably realizing this wasn't going to go the way Karen had hoped, but she wasn't done yet. "We'll be in touch," she snapped. "You can't just build whatever you want and expect there to be no consequences." I gave her a smile, the kind you save for telemarketers and rattlesnakes. "Oh, I expect consequences, just not from you." They left, grumbling. I stood there a while, letting the sun soak into my arms. Then I picked the hose back up and kept watering, because that's the thing about land. When it's yours, it listens only to you. It started with an envelope. Nothing fancy, just a plain white envelope, the kind you'd find a past-due cable bill in, with my name printed in all caps and a return address from the Clear Valley Heights Homeowners Association. Cute. I opened it over coffee, half expecting another pamphlet about visual integrity or some HOA branded apology for trespassing. Instead, I got blindsided. According to this letter, my property had been temporarily integrated into a new extended oversight zone, an initiative they claimed supported by a recent consensus from the Clear Ridge Planning Committee in conjunction with a municipal guidance review. Translation, they were pretending they now had authority over my land. The language was bureaucratic gibberish, but the intent was clear as day. They even included a map. Not a real county map, mind you, but some pastel-colored PDF with a bright orange circle drawn around my property, marked Annex Buffer Zone B, the kind of thing a bored intern with access to Microsoft Paint might cook up. After 3 glasses of Chardonnay and a power trip, I called my land lawyer, Greg. Guy's a tank in khakis, real estate litigator with a voice like gravel and the attention span of a hawk. I sent him the letter, the map, and the HOA's contact info. 20 minutes later, he called me back and said, "Trevor, this is bullshit." That was all I needed to hear. We agreed to meet in town that afternoon. On my way to the courthouse, I swung by the county assessor's office, just to make sure. It was worse than I thought. They'd filed something. An actual document in the county record system flagging my parcel as under temporary administrative overlay, subject to review per HOA partnered buffer expansion request. I stared at the screen like it was a bad joke. "Who approved this?" I asked the clerk behind the desk, a woman in her 60s who looked like she'd rather be throat punched than dragged into another HOA mess. She checked her notes. "Looks like it was authorized by Deputy Registrar Miller. Interim designation. Not finalized." Of course, Miller, the same guy who once tried to fine me for putting gravel on a county easement. I asked for a printed copy of the change and walked out of there with steam coming off my boots. Greg was waiting with his sleeves rolled and a file already open. He scanned the document, muttering under his breath, then looked up at me with that expression lawyers get when they smell malpractice. They slid this in without a public hearing. No notifications, no mailing list, no review board. Just filed it like a gas bill. That's illegal in 3 different ways. I figured. They're hoping you won't fight it. Just roll over and comply while they evaluate whether or not to keep you. I grinned. They picked the wrong dirt farmer. We spent the next 2 hours pulling every archived zoning map we could find. And, buddy, we found gold. Old maps from 1993, revisions from 2008, even a satellite survey from last year. Not a single one included my property inside any HOA boundary. In fact, one of them, a planning committee memo, explicitly noted that the Clear Valley Heights expansion proposal had excluded my land due to ownership complexity and infrastructure incompatibility. In other words, they deliberately avoided me. When they built their little Stepford utopia because my well and septic made it inconvenient to fold into their cookie-cutter grid. Now, suddenly, I was a zoning emergency. I submitted a formal challenge to the registrar's office, demanded a hearing, and requested a full audit of Miller's buffer zone approvals. Greg filed a preliminary injunction notice in case they tried to escalate. I even contacted a regional news blog that had once done a piece on water rights in the hills, just to start stirring the pot. Back home, I scanned and printed every relevant document, every map, every time-stamped file. I labeled them by hand and put them in a binder thicker than a church casserole book. Then I mounted a fresh private property sign on the entrance gate in case someone needed a reminder. And I waited. Let them come. I've dealt with pests before. Mice in the hayloft, beetles in the tomatoes, even a bear once who thought my compost pile was a buffet. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the two-legged parasites with clipboards and vague credentials that showed up on my land that following week. It started with a Prius. I was checking the moisture sensors near the basil beds when I saw it creeping up the access road like it was trying not to be seen. White, mud-splattered, license plate crooked. Classic HOA recon vehicle if I had to stereotype. Two people got out, a man with thinning hair and a woman with sunglasses big enough to qualify as architecture. Both wore reflective vests labeled Community Eco Compliance Team. I didn't recall signing up for any pageant, but sure. "Can I help you?" I asked, already halfway annoyed. The woman raised a little laminated badge that might have come from a cereal box. "We're conducting a precautionary soil inspection following a community environmental complaint." I blinked. "From who?" "We're not authorized to disclose that." "Are you with the EPA?" "No, sir." "State Department of Agriculture?" "No." "So just to be clear, you're a couple of volunteers in vests pretending to be the USDA?" "We're authorized by the Clear Valley Heights HOA Environmental Task Group." I couldn't help it. I laughed. "You're 2 miles outside your jurisdiction and standing on private land. You've got about 5 seconds to take your Etsy badges and your clipboard full of dreams and get back in that little rental before I fertilize your shoes." They left. Eventually, but not before the man tried to take photos of my compost bin. The next morning, I found a letter taped to my gate. No envelope this time, just duct tape and spite. It was from the Colorado Department of Environmental Quality. A formal notice. According to the complaint, my farming practices were endangering the watershed, and I was suspected of discharging unregulated nitrogen compounds into the soil. I'd never seen bureaucratic language get so creative in trying to accuse someone of growing corn. They wanted lab samples, chemical logs, and an appointment for site evaluation. I immediately called my lawyer, then my soil consultant. Then, because my blood pressure was starting to make my left eye twitch, I called my ex-wife's cousin Craig, who happened to be a certified agronomist and owed me a favor. From that time, I helped him hide a boat from the IRS. Craig came out 2 days later with his testing gear in a cooler of Coors. We took samples from every bed, the compost pile, the runoff line, and even the damn mulch bags. He called me 3 days later to confirm my soil was clean enough to baptize a baby in. Nitrogen levels were well within state-approved organic farming thresholds. There were no synthetic residues, no leaching, and no violations. I submitted the report. No apology from the state, of course, just a polite form email. "Thank you for your cooperation." But things weren't done. That same night, around 2 in the morning, my security system pinged. I pulled up the feed and saw 3 figures, all dressed in black, crouched by the irrigation lines near the bean rows. One of them had a utility knife. Another held a jug, unmarked, but with a red cap and a shape that screamed not water. They were cutting the lines. I watched, mouth dry, as they poured something into the soil. I called the sheriff's department and told them there were intruders sabotaging my farm. By the time the deputy got there, a kid named Richie with more beard than badge, they were long gone. I showed him the footage. He whistled low. "Jesus, you piss off a cartel or something?" "Worse," I muttered. "I pissed off an HOA." We took soil samples the next morning, just in case. The preliminary test lit up like a Christmas tree. Someone had dumped high-concentration herbicide into 3 beds, the kind of stuff banned from consumer sale. It killed everything within a 12-foot radius and probably sterilized the dirt for the next 3 seasons. I filed a police report, sent the footage to my lawyer, backed up every frame to the cloud and 3 hard drives. Then I walked to the ruined rows and stood in silence. The basil was already curling in on itself. My tomatoes, strong, beautiful, weeks from harvest, looked like someone had exhaled poison across them. My hands clenched into fists without my permission. This wasn't vandalism. This was war, and I was just getting warmed up. I used to think that HOA types were just glorified clipboard collectors, the sort of folks who get aroused by font consistency on mailbox numbers. But after what happened to my irrigation system, I stopped underestimating them. These people weren't just fussy. They were coordinated, and they were ramping up. A few days after the sabotage, I got a call from my neighbor up the ridge. Dale, Vietnam vet, big on conspiracy theories, bigger on barbecue. He told me something strange was happening down in Clear Valley Heights. Word was, they were holding an emergency community meeting to discuss local property assimilation and environmental harmonization. HOA speak for Let's Take His Land. I asked Dale if he could attend. He said, I wouldn't miss it even if I had a stroke mid-toast. He came back with stories. According to Dale, and he's not the type to exaggerate unless tequila's involved, Karen ran the whole thing like a Baptist revival. Charts, graphs, fear-mongering, and a guest speaker who claimed unregulated farming on the outer perimeter threatened property values and could trigger invasive species blooms. They passed a motion, not legally binding, but aggressive as hell, to pursue acquisition of my land through community-driven land value reallocation. That's HOA code for let's pressure him until he sells. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, a man in a blazer with a HOA pin showed up at my gate. No appointment, just strolled up like he was delivering mail. Mr. Haynes, I represent the Property Relations Subcommittee of Clear Valley Heights. I'd like to make an offer. He handed me a letter printed on thick paper that smelled like cologne and printer toner. The figure was insulting, $140,000 for 12 acres with water rights, a renovated house, and an eco-irrigation system, a bad joke with a wax seal. I smiled. You're missing a zero. He chuckled like we were buddies at a country club. Well, we factored in the encumbrances, the ongoing compliance concerns. Think of this as a generous exit opportunity. I handed it back. Think of this as my property and then get the hell off it. He left without arguing, but not without leaving a business card tucked under the gate latch. I tossed it in the compost bin. Next morning, I found tire tracks on the side trail leading to the eastern edge of my land. It's an old service path, barely visible unless you know what to look for. Someone had driven up to the tree line during the night. No cameras caught them. It was out of my range, but I knew a message when I saw one. That same week, I got a visit from 2 more men. These weren't realtors. They looked like they belonged in a straight-to-red-box mob thriller. One tall with greasy hair, the other round and sunburnt. They introduced themselves as independent property transition consultants. Some folks in the community are getting nervous, said the tall one, voice too smooth to trust. They feel this whole situation's creating tension. Unnecessary friction. Lot of eyes on you, said the round one. We just want to help find a peaceful path forward. Sell the land. Take the check. The first one continued. You can start over somewhere fresh. Somewhere that doesn't need a fence. I stepped out onto the porch and let them feel the weight of my silence. Then I pointed at the gate. That's your peaceful path forward. They didn't argue, but one of them turned back at the last second and said, no one likes when things get complicated. After they left, I installed motion sensors along the east trail, added 2 more cameras, and called Greg. He told me to document everything and not engage. Easy for him to say. He wasn't sleeping with a 12 gauge next to his bed. I took a walk to the south field and stood by the ruined tomato rows. The earth was recovering, slowly. Basil was gone. Beans may be salvageable, but I could feel something brewing, not in the soil, in the air. Then I went to my workshop. That night, I started printing out every email, every map, every file tied to that buffer zone bullshit. I opened a new folder labeled Counteroffensive. I wasn't just defending my land anymore. I was going to burn their damn lies to the ground. I always thought paranoia was something that happened to other people. The guy with tinfoil on his windows. The lady who thinks birds are government drones. But by the time I started cataloging license plates in a notebook and checking the seals on my gas tank twice a day, I had to admit, this war was getting to me. Because this wasn't just neighborly meddling anymore. This was a coordinated, well-funded campaign, and I was pretty sure I'd found the wallet behind it. It started with Greg, my lawyer, calling me late on a Thursday with that particular edge in his voice. The one that said, I've been digging through something nasty, and now you need to hear it. He'd been following the trail of the temporary buffer zone designation. After filing the injunction and requesting the audit, he'd finally gotten hold of internal emails through a public records request. Most of them were boring, bureaucratic noise, except for one. It was from Deputy Registrar Miller, the same jackass who filed my parcel into HOA purgatory, addressed to a woman named Angela Varnum, CC'd to a few HOA officials, and someone from a private planning firm out of Denver. Greg did some digging. Angela wasn't part of Clear Valley Heights. She was a project coordinator for Horizon Resort Developments, a heavyweight in luxury real estate, specialized in master-planned communities, ski-in, ski-out villas, and sustainable gated utopias for the Silicon Valley escape crowd. Turns out, Horizon had been quietly buying up parcels around Clear Valley Heights for the last 18 months. They'd acquired over 200 acres just south of my land, enough for a full-blown resort complex, spa, hotel, retail village, faux rustic cabins, and guess who was sitting smack between them and the state road? Yeah, me. Greg's voice turned grim. They don't just want you out. You're in the way, literally. I sat there staring at the fire pit out back, realizing for the first time that this wasn't about tomatoes or basil or HOA bylaws. This was about infrastructure. My property blocked the only flat corridor for utility access. If they couldn't run water, sewer, or road through my land, their whole project stalled. And now, it made sense. The fake environmental complaints, the phony inspectors, the bad press, the sudden visibility zone map they invented. Karen and her crew weren't acting on their own. They were puppets. Horizon was pulling the strings. I didn't waste time. I called in a favor from a guy I knew back in my corporate days. Alex, former competitor, now independent developer with a grudge against Horizon. He owed me. I helped expose a pesticide cover-up years ago that saved his ass in court. Alex got me internal presentation slides from Horizon's investor briefings. Sure enough, there it was. A little blue rectangle labeled Potential Acquisition Phase 3 Connector. That rectangle was my land. Below it, contingent on compliance resolution with adjacent parcel owner. Translation, make me go away, one way or another. I sat in my workshop that night, lights off, going through everything. Footage of the sabotage, the fake inspection forms, the letters, the media hit pieces. That's when I remembered something. The man with the clipboard who offered to buy me out had used the exact same phrase, exit opportunity, as the Horizon slides. Corporate speak, not HOA lingo. I pulled up the security footage from his visit, zoomed in on his lapel pin, not HOA. Horizon's emblem, clean and subtle, like they thought nobody would notice. Now I was pissed, but I wasn't stupid. You don't punch a bear head on. You bleed it slowly. I called Greg. We built a new file, labeled zoning fraud just corporate malfeasance, and started feeding documentation to a few choice channels. A freelance journalist in Boulder, known for torching land corruption, a state rep running on an anti-development platform, and a landowners' rights nonprofit out of Fort Collins. I also got a call from Craig, my soil guy, who'd run further tests on the poisoned beds. He traced the herbicide blend to a discontinued industrial formula used in commercial landscaping contracts, the kind Horizon subcontractors used. He smiled on the phone. You didn't just get sabotaged, you got branded. I smiled back. Then it's time to return the favor. I installed new floodlights along the southern edge of my property. Started hosting garden tours for anyone curious about soil recovery after sabotage. Students, local activists, even a retired judge with an organic greenhouse habit. I gave interviews, quietly, precisely. Nothing dramatic, just facts. But beneath all that, I was digging, because somewhere out there, Horizon had made one mistake. They left a trail, and I was going to follow it all the way to the head office. The funny thing about secrets is they always leak, especially when there's money involved. And Horizon, they were leaking like a goddamn sieve. The moment I started connecting dots publicly, everything changed. For weeks, they had the narrative. I was just a stubborn recluse, hoarding land and undermining community development. They had the PR. They had the politicians. Hell, they had half the local paper eating out of their hands, until I gave them something to choke on. It started small. I uploaded the night vision footage, the one where Karen's so-called eco-compliance team poisoned my irrigation lines, to a local land rights forum. No commentary, no accusations, just the video, time-stamped and tagged trespassing sabotage. Private land. It got picked up on Reddit within 6 hours. 10,000 views by morning, 20 by lunch. Then I dropped the next piece, Horizon's investor slide deck, anonymously to a whistleblower site. The document with my land marked as a Phase 3 connector. I redacted my parcel number, but the implication was clear. They were trying to seize private property for commercial access under the guise of HOA regulation. That's when the press calls started coming in. Real ones this time, Not Karen's pet bloggers or HOA newsletters, but actual reporters, investigative types. One woman from Denver drove up the hill with a mic and a cameraman, asked if I'd be willing to talk on record. I invited them in, made coffee, and walked them through the timeline. Clean, calm, no theatrics. Within 48 hours, I was trending on local news as the farmer in the crosshairs. By the end of the week, people knew my name, not as some hillbilly squatter or HOA reject, but as a landowner fighting back. Karen's response was predictable. Another emergency HOA bulletin delivered by mail and email accusing me of unauthorized media engagement and deliberate defamation of community governance structures. She tried to spin it as me attacking her personally. Claimed she'd received threats, that I was inciting anti-HOA extremism. She even organized a press-friendly community protest on the main road near my property. 25 people, most of them Horizon staffers in plain clothes, holding signs that read things like "Protect Neighborhood Harmony" and "No to Unregulated Land Abuse." I recognized 3 of them from earlier surveillance footage. One guy had been the soil inspector in a fake vest. Another had offered to buy my land 3 weeks ago, but the game was up. Greg handed everything over to the county sheriff, including a fresh set of internal documents obtained via another public records request. These ones were real dynamite. Email threads between Karen and Deputy Registrar Miller, full of phrases like accelerated integration strategy and prearranged oversight filing. There were even payment records. Horizon had donated $15,000 to the Registrar's Infrastructure Awareness Initiative the same week my buffer zone was filed. I passed all of it, videos, emails, documents, to the Denver Reporter. She ran the story under the headline, HOA, or Hostile Takeover, the secret land deal targeting a Colorado farmer. It exploded. Karen tried to hold a press conference, claimed I'd forged everything, claimed I was radicalized, that I was working with extremist anti-zoning groups. But the more she screamed, the more pathetic she sounded. And then came the subpoena. The sheriff's office, now fully involved, issued a warrant to search the HOA's central office. Fraud, falsified land filings, suspected sabotage, conspiracy. They hit the building like a thunderclap. Boxes of records, hard drives, everything seized. Karen wasn't arrested, not yet, but she was photographed being escorted out looking like someone just canceled her country club membership. The Horizon executives weren't so lucky. One of them, a VP of acquisitions, resigned the next day. Another was placed under internal investigation after leaked emails showed they had been coordinating the PR campaign against me directly, feeding talking points to the HOA board. By the end of that week, Horizon stock dipped 2%. Their entire Clear Valley resort plan was under reevaluation pending legal review. Their site went quiet. No updates, no tweets, just radio silence. And Clear Valley Heights, they went into full damage control. The HOA board suspended all outreach activities. Their social media pages went dark. The eco-compliance team was officially dissolved. Karen herself, still clinging on, barely, but the pressure was mounting. Funny how fast a mob turns when the money dries up. I stood out on my porch the next morning, coffee in one hand, binoculars in the other, watched the HOA clubhouse get boarded up, watched a couple of Horizon suits drive out of town in a rental SUV, looking like they'd just buried a body. I wasn't done yet, but I'd cracked the wall. And now daylight was pouring in. For the first time in months, the silence on my land felt like peace. Not tension. No more unmarked cars idling by the tree line. No more anonymous letters duct taped to my fence. Just the sound of wind through the corn, what was left of it, and the slow hum of my water pump doing its job without being sabotaged. But I wasn't naive. I'd kicked over a hornet's nest, and while the stingers were scattered, the hive hadn't burned down just yet. Karen was still clinging to her HOA throne like it was a lifeboat on the Titanic. Despite the raid, despite the press, despite half her board members resigning, she released a statement claiming she was the true victim of a media circus orchestrated by a hostile actor. That hostile actor, of course, being me. She called me a conspiracy theorist, said I fabricated attacks to derail a community wellness initiative. She even cited my militarized perimeter upgrades as proof of escalation. Militarized, mind you, meaning motion sensors and deer cams, apparently. But the more she shouted, the more people stopped listening, because something had changed. People started showing up. Not with clipboards or threats, but with questions. Students from a state university EDGE program wanted to study the recovery of my poisoned soil. A nonprofit called Ground Roots offered pro bono testing and remediation support. One of the local ranchers, a guy who hadn't spoken to me in 2 years after a heated debate about fence lines, pulled up in his truck, tossed me a six-pack, and said, "Damn shame what they tried to pull. You need anything welded." Even the local paper, which had parroted HOA narratives for months, published an editorial titled, "When Authority Overreaches, Lessons from a Fence Line." Meanwhile, Horizon? They went quiet. Completely. Their Clear Valley Expansion Project website redirected to a 404 error. No press releases, no tweets. The Denver Reporter told me off record that multiple execs had been subpoenaed, and one, Angela Varnum, was named in a federal ethics complaint involving zoning manipulation and bribery. Greg, ever the optimist, advised caution. It's not over until they drop the lawsuits, kill the filings, and issue formal retractions. But even he sounded like a man loosening his tie for the first time in months. The real surprise came a few weeks later when the county sent me a certified letter, not another threat, but confirmation. The temporary buffer zone designation had been voided, not suspended, not under review. Voided, as if it had never existed. I framed that bastard and hung it next to my grandfather's photo in the kitchen. I started sleeping better, ate real meals again, sat on the porch at dusk and listened to the sound of frogs down by the creek without thinking someone might be slashing my hoses. One afternoon, I got a call from a journalist out of New Mexico who was writing a piece on the weaponization of HOAs. Said my case was gaining traction in other states. The people were quoting my lawsuit filings as part of a larger movement pushing for HOA reform. "You're becoming a kind of symbol," she said. I laughed. "I'm just a guy who wanted to grow tomatoes." That's exactly why. I didn't ask for a spotlight. I sure as hell didn't plan to be in one. But when it lands on you, and you're still standing, you've got a choice. Retreat into the shadows, or use the light. So I leaned in. I started a small community initiative called Freedom to Grow. Not a foundation, not a pack. Just neighbors helping neighbors push back against bad zoning and power-drunk boards. We held our first meeting in the barn. 12 people came. Next week, 24. Dale grilled burgers. A retired judge brought potato salad. Someone brought moonshine. No one talked about politics, just property lines, bylaws, legal loopholes, and how to fight back when someone decides your home is inconvenient to their master plan. Karen's HOA imploded. The remaining board members resigned en masse after the sheriff's office confirmed an active criminal investigation. Karen herself, no longer smiling in press photos, was reportedly lawyering up hard. The county froze the HOA's bank accounts pending audit. There was talk of dissolution. And Horizon, word on the ridge was they sold off half the land they'd bought. Quietly, cheaply. A loss they could afford maybe, but one they didn't want public. I didn't care about their margins. I just wanted my soil back. I stood in the southern field that night, hands in the dirt, feeling the life return. Slowly, stubbornly, like me. The basil wouldn't be back this season, but the tomatoes? They were pushing new green, fighting through poison, clinging to life. Sometimes survival is the biggest screw you of all. They arrested Karen on a Tuesday morning. No warning, no press conference, just a county marshal, 2 deputies, and a warrant served cold as mountain steel. They walked right into the makeshift HOA office, the one she'd stubbornly relocated to her garage after their clubhouse got shut down, and led her out in handcuffs while her neighbor filmed the whole thing from behind a rhododendron bush. She didn't scream, didn't cry, just kept muttering something about community preservation and property aesthetics, like those were legal defenses. But the charges were real: tampering with public records, conspiracy to commit fraud, destruction of private property, and my personal favorite, criminal trespass with intent to sabotage. The feds hadn't come for her yet. Not officially, but the county wasn't waiting anymore. Too much evidence, too much heat. Greg called me 30 minutes later. "She's done," he said, like he didn't quite believe it. Full indictment, and get this, one of her cronies flipped. Gave up the whole sabotage plan, the payments from Horizon, everything. Turns out the eco-compliance team was actually a landscaping crew owned by Karen's nephew. They'd been doing horizon side work for years under different shell names and billed the HOA for environmental monitoring services. Classic, dumb, traceable. I didn't dance. I didn't celebrate. I just went out to the edge of my land, where the tomatoes had started to fruit again, and stood there while the sun crept over the ridge. Sometimes winning feels like silence, not applause, just the absence of boots on your driveway. The court settlement came next. Horizon folded fast once the subpoenas started flying. They didn't admit guilt, of course not, but they issued a public apology, withdrew all development filings, and offered a mutual resolution package. The county fined them $750,000 for improper lobbying and zoning interference. Half of that went into a newly formed landowner defense fund, something Greg and I helped draft. As for me, I got $650,000 in damages. Enough to fix the irrigation, replace the poison beds, pay off the last of my mortgage, and fund Freedom to Grow for the next 3 years. I didn't buy a sports car. I bought a backhoe. Karen, she got 8 years. That surprised even me. But when the judge read the charges, the mail fraud, the tampering, the conspiracy, it added up. She never once admitted guilt, never apologized, just sat there with her jaw clenched like she still couldn't believe the HOA rules didn't outrank the Constitution. Her sentencing made the front page. So did the quote from the judge. Homeowners associations are not governments. And this court does not recognize aesthetic discomfort as justification for criminal acts. Beautiful. Clear Valley Heights collapsed. Without Horizon, without Karen, without their secret money pipeline, the whole thing unraveled. Half the residents petitioned to disband the HOA entirely. The other half moved out. I still get mail meant for them sometimes. I don't forward it. The land, though, the land healed. I spent the next season rebuilding. Not just the garden, but everything. Regraded the southern slope. Brought in new soil, composted from scratch. Built an open-air classroom on the edge of the corn rows, started hosting weekend workshops, soil chemistry, water rights, property law, things no one teaches in schools anymore. And in early spring, just as the snow was giving up, I held the first Freedom to Grow Harvest Fair. No tickets, no gate, just neighbors, food, music, and signs that read, no boards, no bylaws, just roots. People came from 3 counties over. One woman drove up from Arizona. She'd lost her land in a similar scheme years ago and just wanted to see what survival looked like. It looked like basil. It looked like tomatoes strung on wire trellises and kids throwing dirt at each other while their parents learned how not to get steamrolled by a fake ordinance. It looked like justice. At the edge of the property by the old gate, I put up a new sign, burned into cedar, sealed with linseed oil. The letters hand-carved, dark and proud. This is free land, not to be confused with the Them prison down the road they call an he. Sometimes I sit under it in the evenings, beer in hand, boots muddy, and watch the sun slip behind the ridge. I didn't start this fight, but I damn well finished it.